It was pity that stayed Bilbo's hand. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them, Frodo? Gandalf remarks in Peter Jackson's film adaptation of The Fellowship of the Ring. Compassion stayed Bilbo's hand that day, the wizard replied, his tone gentle yet reproving, and we should be grateful for it. Many who live deserve death, and many who die deserve life. Are you prepared to make such judgments, Frodo Baggins? The same moment, but from Ian Chesterfield's novelization, itself adapted from Jackson's film. These two interpretations of the same moment provide us with a rich case study in the contrasting strengths of novelistic and cinematic storytelling. The film version is direct and stripped down, using short, evocative phrases which leave space for tone, facial expression, and sound to provide emotional texture. Prose, by contrast, thrives on elaboration and must create mood and tone through description alone. This kind of explicit narrative interpretation is less necessary in film, where the audience can see and hear the performance directly, whereas prose allows the reader to linger with the thought, exploring not just what is said, but how it is said, and why. To further explore these differences, this video will look at one part of the story in both the film and the novelization of The Fellowship of the Ring. First, we'll watch a short clip from the film. Then, we'll read the matching chapter from the novelization. Since films move quickly and can show a lot in just a few minutes, while novels often take pages to describe the same events, we'll break the novelization chapters into short passages. After each passage, we'll stop to talk about what works well in the novel, what might be stronger in the film, and how each version tells the story in its own way. We'll go back and forth like this until we've worked through the whole chapter. At the end, we'll wrap everything up by thinking about what each medium does best, where they might struggle, and how comparing them helps us understand the story in a new way. By the time we're finished, we'll have a much clearer idea of how storytelling changes when it moves from screen to page, and why that matters. Let's begin.
I have no memory of this place.
Are we lost? I think we are. Shh! Gandalf's thinking. Merry,
What?
I'm hungry. There's something down there.
It's Gollum.
Gollum.
He's been following us for 3 days.
He escaped the dungeons of Barad-dûr.
Escaped, or set loose. He hates and loves the ring, as he hates and loves himself. He will never be rid of his need for it.
It's a pity Bilbo didn't kill him when he had the chance.
Pity? It was pity that stayed Bilbo's hand. Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them, Frodo? Do not be too eager to deal out death and judgment. Even the very wise cannot see all ends. My heart tells me that Gollum has some part to play yet, for good or ill, before this is over. The pity of Bilbo may rule the fate of many.
I wish the ring had never come to me.
I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. There are other forces at work in this world, Frodo, besides the will of evil. Bilbo was meant to find the ring, in which case you also were meant to have it, and that is an encouraging thought. Ah, it's that way.
He's remembered.
Oh, but the air doesn't smell so foul down here. If in doubt, Meriadoc, always follow your nose. Let me risk a little more light. Behold, the great realm and dwarf city of Dwarrodelf.
Well, there's an eye-opener, make no mistake.
Ah! Gimli! No. No. Oh. No. No. Here lies Balin, son of Funin, lord of Moria. He is dead then. It's as I feared.
We must move on. We cannot linger.
They have taken the bridge and the second hall. We have barred the gates, but cannot hold them for long. The ground shakes. Drums. Drums in the deep. We cannot get out. A shadow moves in the dark. We cannot get out. They are coming.
Next, we'll read the first passage from the chapter of the novelization, and then compare and analyze the differences. The narrow stone pathway crumbled beneath their feet as the company ventured deeper into the ancient dwarven stronghold. Darkness pressed in from all sides, held at bay only by the pale luminescence emanating from the wizard's staff. The air hung heavy with the scent of dust and decay, a testament to the countless years since living souls had traversed these forgotten halls. Each member of the unlikely band moved with weapons ready, muscles tense with anticipation. At the rear, the broad-shouldered warrior from Gondor kept vigilant watch over their path, his shield gleaming dully in the weak light. Ahead of them, their leader's grey-robed figure moved with surprising nimbleness, despite his apparent age, guiding them through the labyrinth passages of Moria. They passed beneath a weathered archway, and emerged into a vast cavern that seemed to swallow them whole. The space opened up around them, an immense cemetery carved from living rock. Narrow bridges spanned bottomless chasms, and stairways both broad and narrow crisscrossed the space like the threads of some giant stone spider's web. The two smallest members of the company struggled with the steep climb. Their curly-haired heads barely reached the height of a normal stair, forcing them to scramble up the ancient stonework like children scaling a wall.
Mind your footing.
the stockier of the two hobbits whispered to his companion as they navigated past a grim reminder of the mine's history. Skeletal remains sprawled across the steps, their bony fingers still clutching rusted weapons. His warning came too late, as his friend's foot slipped on a crumbling tome, sending loose pages fluttering into the abyss below. The hobbit would have followed had his companion not lunged forward, grabbing his coat and yanking him back to safety.
"Careful, Pip,"
Merry hissed, helping Pippin regain his balance.
"These stairs weren't built for folk our size."
The company continued their ascent through what once must have been a sacred place, a cemetery of the dwarven dead. Yet the graves had been violated, monuments defaced with crude markings, painted in what looked disturbingly like dried blood. The eerie silence was broken only by their labored breathing, and the occasional skitter of loose stones cascading down the endless drop beside them. When they finally reached the summit, exhaustion weighed on them all. Even Frodo, who bore the heaviest burden, though it weighed the least physically, felt his legs trembling with fatigue. The path ahead split into 3 separate tunnels, each mouth a dark portal leading deeper into the mountain's heart. Their guide paused, his weathered face creasing with concern as he studied each opening in turn. The wizard's eyes, normally sharp and certain, now held a troubling hesitation that sent a chill down the spines of his companions.
"Which way now?"
asked the dwarf, his gruff voice barely above a whisper. The wizard remained silent, the light from his staff wavering slightly, as if reflecting his uncertainty.
"I require a moment,"
he finally admitted, settling himself upon a flat rock before the 3 passages.
"My recollection of this place has grown unclear."
The admission hung in the air like a physical presence. The company exchanged worried glances before wordlessly setting up a makeshift camp, while their leader sank deep into contemplation. This opening passage exemplifies the unique strengths of prose as a narrative medium, particularly in the context of adapting a rich, atmospheric world like that of the Fellowship of the Ring. The written word allows for an interiority and sensory layering that film, constrained by external visuals and time, cannot always match. Here, the prose builds a palpable sense of dread and decay through deliberate pacing and evocative imagery. Quote, "Darkness pressed in, pale luminescence, scent of dust and decay." End quotes. These elements not only describe the setting, but imbue it with emotional weight, steeping the reader in a foreboding atmosphere that the film could only imply. One of the most notable strengths lies in the narrator's ability to hover omnisciently, focusing intimately on individual characters' movements and emotions, while maintaining the cohesion of the group's shared peril. The inner tension of the group, especially seen in moments like Frodo's trembling legs or the wizard's uncharacteristic uncertainty, offers psychological depth that the film might have struggled to convey clearly. The prose doesn't just describe what's happening, It reveals the mental state behind each action. This is where adaptation into text shines. It can render unspoken fear, hesitation, or camaraderie with nuance. However, prose also reveals its limitations here, especially when adapted from a story so visually rich. While the descriptions are vivid, they demand effort from the reader to mentally assemble the spatial complexity of the setting, the labyrinth layout, crisscrossing bridges, and yawning chasms. In the film, this geography was established in seconds through sweeping camera shots, instantly conveying danger, scale, and directionality. But in prose, the reader must construct it incrementally, and even then, the spatial logic can feel abstract or imprecise. Similarly, the visual impact of certain moments, a foot slipping, a wizard's face lit by flickering starlight, can be more immediately powerful in a visual medium. Let's continue. The ranger from the north lit his pipe, the sweet-smelling smoke creating ghostly patterns in the still air. The others attempted to rest their weary limbs, though sleep eluded them in this place of ancient dread. Frodo sat apart from the others, his thoughts as dark as the chambers surrounding them. A faint sound, like nails scraping against stone, drew his attention to the darkness below. His hand instinctively moved to the chain around his neck, as his eyes strained to penetrate the gloom. A movement caught his attention. Something pale and emaciated, crawling spider-like over the rocks far beneath them. The sight sent a shiver through him, and he rose quickly to approach the wizard. "There's something following us," he whispered, kneeling beside the old man. The wizard didn't seem surprised.
"Yes, he's been trailing us since we entered the mines."
"Who?" Frodo asked, though a terrible suspicion had already formed in his mind.
"The creature known as Gollum,"
the wizard confirmed, his voice heavy with what might have been pity. "Gollum!" Frodo's voice was barely audible, yet filled with disbelief. "How could he have escaped Mordor's dungeons?" The wizard's eyes met his, twinkling with a knowledge that went beyond simple explanation.
"Perhaps he was allowed to leave. The Dark Lord has many servants, not all of whom wear the shape of orcs or men."
He gestured toward the abyss.
"The ring calls to him still, drawing him onward, like a moth to flame. He both craves and despises its power, much as he loathes what he himself has become."
Frodo glanced back toward the darkness where the creature lurked. "My uncle should have ended his miserable existence when he had the chance."
"Compassion stayed Bilbo's hand that day,"
the wizard replied, his tone gentle yet reproving.
"and we should be grateful for it. Many who live deserve death, and many who die deserve life. Are you prepared to make such judgments, Frodo Baggins?"
The hobbit remained silent, unable to answer.
"Even the wisest cannot foresee all outcomes,"
the wizard continued.
"I sense that Gollum still has some role to fulfill before our tale concludes, for better or worse. Bilbo's mercy may yet shape the fate of many."
Frodo's shoulders slumped as the weight of his burden seemed to double. "I wish this responsibility had never fallen to me. I wish none of this evil had touched our lives. The wizard's gnarled hand came to rest on Frodo's shoulder.
Such thoughts have occurred to all who face darkness in their time, but we do not choose the circumstances of our lives, only how we respond to them. You were meant to possess the ring, just as Bilbo was meant to find it.
His expression softened.
There are forces in this world beyond the malice of the enemy, Frodo. Perhaps you were chosen because you, above all others, have the strength to bear this burden.
Suddenly, the wizard straightened, his attention shifting to the 3 passages.
Ah!
He exclaimed, his voice brightening.
This way!
The company quickly gathered their belongings as the wizard pointed toward the rightmost tunnel. Has your memory returned? Asked the stocky hobbit hopefully. The wizard's eyes twinkled with amusement.
No, Master Meriadoc, but the air from this passage smells less foul than the others. When uncertain of your path, trust your senses.
He tapped his nose knowingly.
They rarely lead you astray.
This passage continues to demonstrate the distinctive power of prose to explore emotional complexity, philosophical depth, and subtle narrative transitions in ways that film, even with its visual and auditory richness, often cannot. The interaction between Frodo and Gandalf unfolds not as a dramatic set piece, but as a quiet, contemplative exchange shaped by nuance, tone, and internal tension. The scene operates largely on a metaphysical level, touching on themes of fate, mercy, and moral ambiguity, all of which benefit from the slow, deliberate pacing of written language. One of the major strengths of the prose here is its ability to dwell, to linger on Frodo's internal conflict, on the shadow of Gollum's presence, and on Gandalf's careful choice of words. The written form allows time to stretch and breathe, to fill the emotional space between lines. Frodo's, quote, shoulders slumped as the weight of his burden seemed to double, end quote, is not just physical description, but symbolic reflection, capturing both his exhaustion and his dawning realization of the stakes. Such introspective layering is more difficult in film, unless paired with voiceover or a strong visual metaphor. That said, prose carries limitations here as well. Much like in the previous excerpt, spatial dynamics and ambient tension rely entirely on the reader's imaginative faculties. Gollum's presence, described as a pale figure, quote, crawling spider-like over the rocks far beneath them, end quote, is eerie but less viscerally immediate than it was in the visual medium. The film was able to present his spooky nature in a single image, whereas the novelization must carefully build his unease through description and implication. Let's continue. With renewed purpose, the Fellowship followed their guide down a winding staircase that opened into blackness so complete it seemed to swallow the light from the wizard's staff. He paused at the threshold, raising the staff higher.
I shall risk a stronger illumination,
he murmured, focusing his will through the crystal atop the gnarled staff. What happened next stole the breath from every member of the company. Light bloomed outward like a silent lightning strike, revealing a chamber so vast that for a moment they could not comprehend its scale. Massive pillars stretched upward into shadows, each one carved with intricate patterns that spoke of craftsmanship beyond mortal understanding. The floor beneath their feet was polished stone, smooth as glass and black as midnight.
Behold,
the wizard announced, his voice echoing through the immensity.
the great realm and dwarf city of Dwarodelph.
Sam gaped at the spectacle before them. Now that's something you don't see every day, he whispered reverently. They stood transfixed, necks craned backward as they attempted to take in the full grandeur of the hall. Countless pillars, each thicker than the oldest trees in the Shire, supported a ceiling so high it remained hidden in the shadow despite the wizard's light. The craftsmanship spoke of an age when dwarven artisans had reached the pinnacle of their prowess, creating beauty that had endured long after their civilization had fallen. Led by the wizard's illuminated staff, they began their journey across the enormous hall. The ranger brought up the rear, the torch in his hand casting dancing shadows that seemed to follow them like wraiths. As they approached the far side of the chamber, the dwarf suddenly froze mid-step. His eyes widened at something ahead, a doorway with splintered wooden doors hanging from broken hinges. Black feathered arrows protruded from the timbers, and sprawled across the threshold lay the skeletal remains of dwarven defenders. Before anyone could stop him, the dwarf let out a cry of dismay and rushed forward.
Gimli, wait!
The wizard called after him, but his words fell on deaf ears. The fellowship hurried after their dwarven companion as he disappeared through the shattered doorway. They found themselves in another chamber, smaller than the great hall, but still impressive in scale. A single shaft of sunlight pierced the gloom from a small opening high in the eastern wall, falling directly upon a rectangular stone block in the center of the room. The dwarf had fallen to his knees before this monolith, his proud shoulders shaking with grief. All around the chamber lay evidence of a desperate last stand. Skeletal remains of dwarves and goblins intermingled on the floor, weapons still clutched in bony hands. In one corner stood a stone well, its depths plunging into unknown darkness. The wizard approached the central stone reverently. Runes were carved into its white surface, and he traced them gently with his fingers as he read aloud.
Here lies Balin, son of Fundine, lord of Moria.
He placed a comforting hand on the dwarf's shoulder.
He has passed beyond our reach, my friend. My fears have proven true.
This passage showcases the novelization's most potent strengths. The ability to construct grandeur, evoke emotional nuance, and dwell meaningfully in moments of revelation and loss. The descriptive prose allows the reader to experience Dwarodelph not as a fleeting visual marvel, as it appeared in the film, but as a sacred space imbued with history, tragedy, and awe. Through carefully paced language and vivid sensory detail, the writer invites the reader not just to see the chamber, but to feel its weight, its silence, its reverence, its vastness. The light expanding, quote, like a silent lightning strike, end quote, is a metaphor that prose handles elegantly. Visually striking, yet silent and intimate. In the film, this moment was underscored by a dramatic wide shot, but here the emphasis is placed on the characters' stunned perception, drawing out their collective breathlessness. The physical scale of the hall, the intricacy of the stonework, and the polished black floor are rendered with almost architectural attention. In prose, this affords the opportunity to linger, to slow down, and let the reader absorb the layered grandeur, not just as spectacle, but as evidence of a lost world. Where prose has slight limitations, however, is in depicting physical scale with immediacy. While it does its best to convey the magnitude of the chamber, readers must interpret the scene through their imagination, whereas the film was able to render the scale with a few grand sweeping shots. Pacing also reveals the medium's trade-offs. The passage takes time, pausing for description, reflection, emotional observation, while the film compressed this into a few seconds of screen time. But that extra space is precisely what allows the prose to build emotional weight. The stillness after discovery, the quiet naming of Balin's tomb, the shift from grandeur to grief, all are more thoroughly felt because they unfold on the page rather than race past the eye. Let's continue. The elf's keen eyes darted nervously around the chamber.
We should not linger here,
he cautioned in a hushed voice.
This place holds nothing but death.
The wizard's attention shifted to a large battered book, clutched in the skeletal hands of a dwarf propped against the tomb. Carefully removing it from the brittle grasp, he blew away layers of dust and opened the fragile tome. The pages, stained with what appeared to be dried blood, cracked as he turned to the final entries.
They have claimed the bridge and the second hall,
he read, his voice growing more somber with each word.
We have sealed the gates, but cannot hold them back for long. The ground trembles beneath our feet. Drums, endless drums in the darkness. We are trapped. There is no escape. Something moves in the shadows. Will no one come to our aid? They approach.
The fellowship stood in uneasy silence as the wizard's voice trailed off. The youngest hobbit, unnerved by the grim tale, backed away nervously, directly into the stone well behind him. His sudden movement disturbed a precariously balanced skeleton perched on its edge. Before anyone could react, the armored remains toppled into the shaft with a tremendous crash. The hobbit's face drained of colour as the clattering descent echoed throughout the chamber, growing louder as more debris was dislodged. A heavy chain followed, unwinding from its mooring with a sound like steel thunder. The noise seemed to continue for an eternity before finally fading into silence. Every member of the fellowship remained frozen, scarcely daring to breathe as they listened for any response from the depths below. The wizard's face had darkened with anger and fear. He slammed the ancient book shut and rounded on the hobbit.
"Fool of a took!"
he hissed, snatching his hat and staff from the trembling hobbit's hands.
"Next time, throw yourself in and spare us your recklessness."
The rebuke hung in the air for only a moment before being replaced by something far more ominous. A low, rolling boom rising from the depths beneath them. It was answered by another, then another, growing in volume and frequency until the very air vibrated with their rhythm. The wizard's expression shifted from anger to dawning horror as the drumbeats were joined by the blast of horns and the sound of countless running feet. Sam's attention was drawn to his master's hip, where a soft blue glow emanated from beneath his cloak.
"Mr. Frodo!"
he said urgently, pointing. Frodo looked down and drew his small sword from its scabbard. The ancient elven blade glowed with an eerie blue light, a warning that left no room for misinterpretation. Their enemies were coming. This final passage vividly exemplifies the written medium's ability to modulate tension, layering atmospheric detail with character reaction in a way that draws the reader deeper into the dread. Prose excels here at building suspense through controlled pacing, specific sensory cues, and the slow collapse of quiet into chaos. The setting, already haunted by the discovery of Balin's tomb, is now fully activated as a stage for fear, and the writing allows this transformation to unfold with agonizing precision. One of the greatest strengths of this scene in prose is the slow ignition of terror. The moment begins in silence, with Legolas's warning and Gandalf's examination of the blood-stained book, a device the prose uses to chilling effect. Unlike the film, which skimmed through shots of scribbled pages, the text draws attention to each line of the final journal entry, letting the dread accumulate, line by line. Prose also shines in its presentation of the accidental trigger, the hobbit's fearful retreat, and the slow-motion horror of the skeleton falling into the well. What makes it especially effective is the cause and effect chain, the nervous movement, the balanced skeleton, the long echoing crash, the chain unspooling like steel thunder. Each step is given space, and the reader's dread deepens with each new sound. In the film, this was undoubtedly a heart-pounding visual and auditory moment, but it passed by in seconds. But in prose, the unfolding is methodical, allowing time to feel the weight of inevitability. It's not just a noise, it's an omen, dragging the past into the present. Still, some of the prose's strengths come with trade-offs. Visual clarity, especially in dynamic or crowded environments, may suffer slightly. While we feel the sequence deeply, we don't see all the spatial relationships between characters, the depth of the well, or the exact layout of the chamber, whereas the film made all these concrete in an instant. But that's also what makes the prose powerful. It partners with the reader, turning imagination into tension. Rather than overwhelming the senses, it guides them toward dread. The film might have hit us with spectacle, but the novelization invites us to anticipate it, to fear it, to hear it internally, before it ever arrives. In this way, prose doesn't just present horror, it lets it build in our bones. Thank you for watching this comparative analysis. Next time, we'll be comparing the scene where the Fellowship faces the awakened foes of Moria with the equivalent chapter in the novelization and analyzing the differences. Take care, and if you're listening to this, please send help.